Good afternoon. This is Professor David Loertscher from the School of Information, San Jose State University. And today we're just so thrilled to have Lisa Lewis with us. And Lisa, introduce yourself to us.
Thank you very much. I am from Toronto, Canada, and I have been a teacher librarian in an elementary school since 2001, but teaching since 2008. And I've just developed a passion for trying to find rich, diverse novels and picture books that really will help my students and their families and our community at large make connections and learn and grow. And I started an intergenerational book club about 6 years ago, and that flourished. I've just got my books launched for this year, and then I just fell in love with this topic that we're going to be delving into about middle grade books with children with neurodiverse challenges. And I just had to flush it out and put it into a paper, and because I think it's really important that we recognize these individuals, and there more and more people are publishing books for this population.
So there's a term that librarians and others know called doors and mirrors. Describe what that concept is with the idea of diversity.
Right. Well, there's doors and mirrors. So you're reading books for several reasons. One, for entertainment. Two, because a teacher's assigned it to you to read. Three, because you want to see yourself in the novel. And that would be a mirror. You're looking at someone who has similar challenges, similar ups and downs, similar situations, similar backgrounds. And when that happens, there's little sparks of joy that occur, and people feel validated. And in the last 2 to 3 years, there's been such a stream of loneliness. And when you make connections with these characters, you feel gratified. And then, so that's mirrors. But windows, you might not understand someone. And I do feel that as a teacher and a librarian, it's my responsibility to make sure children feel that they can have a better ability to understand those that aren't like them. And when we understand those that aren't like us, we realize that they're more similar to us than different. And when that feeling happens, we are able to look at our world, our challenges, our accomplishments with a sense of gratitude. And I really think that these books will become more, not mainstream, but more cherished, right? Because there are many being published every day. And then there's also sliding doors, right? Which you can, because you can go back and forth, right? And I want to go from one world to another world. And this book is opening up that door for me, so I can make that challenge, make that transition, make that leap. Whereas I wouldn't have been able to without the information and the connections in the pages.
So how on earth did you get, have you been able to build a list, and what kind of problems have you discovered out there?
Well, that's a great question. I read a lot, but I also subscribe to electronic newsletters for publishers and authors and book bloggers and book fairs, and a lot comes through on a daily basis, and they're not hard to find. You just search on, and then you just search on the internet and you can find them. And I do use social media I use Twitter and I use Instagram, but I find a lot is on Twitter. Authors are posting quite often. They're reflecting. Quite a few book bloggers, and the middle grade arena is brimming with a great group of readers. And that's what I do every day. I'm online and I see and I comment, and I'll talk about what I'm doing. And then someone says, oh, you need to read this book. And then on Monday nights, there's something that I follow at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's called Middle Grade Book Village. It's an MG book chat. and I've been a host 3 times, and anyone could host it, and you just have a love and a hook, really. And there's 3 people, I think 2 retired librarians and an author, who have just they volunteer and they do this, and they get authors and they get librarians and they get teachers, and they get people who are more interested. So I found out a lot about that. So that, and I'm on a constant search, constant search.
Right.
Yeah.
So what kind of disabilities have you been able to discover that are covered in books?
Yeah, the physical disabilities, deafness and sight disabilities, and people who have been born with deformities. And I have uncovered many books with dyslexia, ADHD, attention deficit hyper disorder, ADD, attention deficit disorder, anxiety, OCD, and depression, and then also there are books written for children whose parents suffer from alcohol and drug addiction issues. So those are, fantastic, and more authors who have these specific challenges are writing books.
Oh, wow.
And that's, the one that I just finished, Flipping Forward, Twisting Back, by Elma Fullerton, a Canadian author. She has dyslexia, and it's a novel written in verse. So I am actually adding that to my upcoming adult child book club roster this year. And what really got me started a couple of years ago was reading Macy McMillan and the Rainbow Goddess. And I read that I was repositioned into a grade 3 class when the pandemic hit. My school board closed all the libraries. So I read this book, and my classroom was in the library. And it just really honed in on me that Macy, who is deaf, lives in her own world, and she can make little connections. And there's a bigger picture, a bigger feeling happening, a bigger rush in my classroom. These kids fell in love with Macy, and so did their parents. And I know the author. She's become a friend of mine because I was nominated for a book. And you asked me how. I'm going to go back to the other question. You asked me how I learned more about books. I chair something called the Silver Birch Fiction list of books. It's do you know it? The Forrester Reading Program in the Ontario Library Association.
No.
They have a program for children from kindergarten to grade 12, and they have categories of books that are nominated, all Canadian authors. So I was co-chairing it, and then this year I started chairing it since 2011, and that's how I have been really, really immersed in this delightful environment. And there's so many books being written now, and then I realized, coming out of the pandemic, especially the children who do have a variety of neurodiverse challenges and physical challenges, that they were really lonely. Their outlet, their ability to progress and feel good about themselves was getting up and going to school, where they could interact with their peers and get the professional support that they required. And that was taken away from them. So I knew we were ready as a group of people.
So how do you use these kind of books in the library or the classroom?
Yeah, great question. I am always pushing books to my teachers. I'm like, here's a great read aloud. Here's what you should do a novel study on. I buy the books. I make them available. When the kids come in, I do book talks, and I will highlight them. I have book displays that highlight, a variety of different themes. And I also pitched my school psychologist, and I said, your division, the special education division in our school board, really needs to be aware of these books. And they give us, here's a strategy to do with this child who has this. Here's a strategy to do with a child who has this. And I go, that's really helpful, but that's one piece of supporting a child. The second piece is reading these books with the child and with the peers, so that people can, and it goes back to the windows and the sliding doors and the mirrors, when the children in the class do feel, oh, I understand why he or she or they said that or did that or acted in that way. Then little bit by bit, we are all progressing. So that's how I do it. And of course, I shared this paper with my staff and other principals and vice principals throughout my school board, just so it could get traction.
So I love the idea that you're working with counselors and school psychologists and including them in all this. How do you, what kind of advice would you have for schools that wanted to kind of adopt this as a thread, in their own schools?
I would say start it sooner rather than later. Yeah. There are so many entry points to either picture books. There are books for middle grade kids. I could suggest books for children in grades 7 and 8 and in older grades. And I think that with reading these books, it goes with having the conversation, unpacking the idea, unpacking the maybe, and defining what dyslexia is, defining what attention deficit disorder is, and making children realize that this is something that we all can do a better job of understanding. And I just say, just start with one book, and then you start with one book, and then it just goes, right? And my list this year has a child has several different I have actually a book called Restart. It's about a young boy that was a kind of an arrogant boy. He thought he was, king of the school and was not the nicest character. He had an accident. He had a brain injury, and it changed him. And he became a helper, a supporter of the people who he used to not be very nice to. And people couldn't figure out what was happening, and it was his brain injury, right? So that, people change, and people can change, and he changed as a result of his brain injury. But I think we, as society, can change as a result of being immersed in these fantastic, diverse novels.
Right.
So yeah, start with one.
And so the question is, do we have any evidence that stories like this actually help?
I love it. That's a great, it's a tough one to answer. That they help. I know that they help. I think you could talk to educators and psychologists and people who do all kinds of therapies, would say, of course they make a difference. Is there empirical data? Not that I know that it exists. It would be a great research project, but I do know from stories, from listening to the kids who are older, going, that book moved me. I couldn't believe it. I understand that person much better. So it's those conversations, those discussions where I know it works, and it has traction and it's meaningful. And also in my adult child book club, I wanted adults to come in to see the library. It's not the same environment that they were used to in the 80s and the 70s or the 60s, because I had grandparents come, I had aunts and uncles come, and my mom even came, and she's almost 80. So I wanted the parents to realize that so much has happened and changed, and I want them to realize that the library is a hub of the school. It's the wheel. It's the center of the wheel. It keeps so much running. So I can't say here's a chart that proves that these books are game changers, but I know. And I know because I know when the parents read these books. I had a parent come up to me. I did a book last year, and it was the main character's brother had Down syndrome. And the mother came up to me and she says, that moved me. And I had parents saying, oh, my cousin has Down syndrome. This book was right. And another one had a learning disability. And then a parent came up to me afterwards and says, well, I've got and she came with her stepson, and she goes, my stepson and I have a completely different relationship because of having those having that conversation for 35 to 45 minutes in a nurturing, quiet, supportive environment where people are listening and sharing. So he understands me better, and I appreciate, and he sees me in a different. So yeah, so it is a game changer. It really, really, really is. And then for kids, kids are feeling ostracized, right? Because they think they're different. You know what? You read in these books, and there's one word that is very common. It's like, I felt weird. I feel weird. People think I'm weird.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
this is a wonderful, wonderful topic, and where libraries and teachers can make such a difference. Tell me what you consider as really the bottom line of all of this.
The bottom line is nurturing our children, our future leaders, our citizens, right? Who are going to be running the world, running something, and protecting our environment, to be open, to be patient, and to be receptive of differences. And it's our differences that make our world much more delightful. And you know what? And we don't know who's going to be born, what challenger they're going to face, or if they're going to, we don't know. I know when I was growing up, dyslexia and so many of these neurodiverse challenges were really not addressed. Yeah. And I don't think they just happened in the last 20 years. So we as society, and then the stigma, right? There's still stigma. And until we're all equal, no one's equal, right? So I do think we also as society, in our educational funding and our educational supports, we need more. We're all, there's been cutbacks and cutbacks and cutbacks. I don't know about your states, but certainly in Ontario, where I am, we have classes of 30, 35 kids. And in any group of people, you're going to have a spectrum of learners. So,
right.
Yeah.
Well, Lisa, this has been a wonderful, wonderful conversation, and what a great idea. And thank you for all of the hard work you've done to build this kind of list and bring it to our attention. And so just thank you, thank you, thank you.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, for helping us share some fantastic material that is accessible to all of us.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you. I'm going to log off.